Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance. Today's session is Partnerships for Successful and Inclusive Workforce Ecosystems. And we are joined today with our partners at NCWE. I am Cynthia Finley, the Vice President of Workforce with IREC, and we are bringing this session to you today with the support of Bank of America. Next slide. Okay, if you are new today to the Clean Energy Workforce, welcome. It is great to have you here with us today. We are a cross-sector effort uniting all clean energy workforce stakeholders, and we have grown to over 600 strong. We plan to accelerate the development of a diverse and highly skilled workforce, which is needed now more than ever in clean energy. We hope to foster more effective and inclusive recruitment for training, education, and job placement. Next slide. So if you are new to the Alliance, I want to give you a little review of what we've been up to. We started in late 2021 with a few key stakeholders, and we have been growing ever since. Our first convening was in January. The first quarter of 2022, so January through April, we worked to identify challenges and opportunities in this space. We convened with employers, training providers, recruiting organizations, and really dug into what the pain points and challenges were in clean energy for developing a workforce system. From 2022 of May to today, we have been really busy. We've held some solution summits. We had a vision summit, which yielded the key recommendations that we reviewed in our last session. Hopefully you have all seen that. If not, it is on the IREC website. We also have continued to bring to you information to operationalize those recommendations, which is what we are doing today. We hope in 2023 to continue conversations on funding, continue to talk about how we can operationalize these recommendations, strengthen our partnerships, and really find out what you all need next. So to that vein, we hope to, in the future sessions, continue to provide you professional development, resources, and some interactive workshops that really dig into what your key pain points are. So do me a favor, and as we go through this session, drop some of those ideas in the chat for what you would really like to dig into and discuss, what pain points you're having. We would love to be able to cultivate a more strategic session for you all to really interact with one another. We're also working on developing an interactive platform that we can connect offline. We're looking at LinkedIn and some other sources and hope to be able to bring that to you soon. Speaking of our next session, we will be working to expand the Alliance key recommendation number 1, providing resources and technical support to develop a national and local regional ecosystem within that space. I am excited to say that we will be joined by Darlene Miller, who is the Executive Director for the National Council of Workforce Education, and she will be discussing building more effective partnerships through advisory committees. So we're really excited about that. Save the date for April 27th at 2, and we will send out information on that as well as we move forward. Today, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you can drop in the chat your name and who you're with. Evie will be dropping in an opt-in form if you'd like to share your information with the group. And please put your questions as we go through in the chat. There will be time for Q&A with our speakers today. And if you have any questions for us, just drop them in the chat. We will be recapping that and sending it out to you when we recap this session. I'd like to turn it over now to our partner, Deb Rowe. She is going to take over the introductions for our great speakers today and take you through the agenda. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Cynthia. And for those of you who came in a minute or two late, know that we are recording this. We went over the history of the Alliance. We're over 600 organizations strong, and we appreciate your time today to really help accelerate the workforce development solutions that we need for a clean energy future and a sustainable economy. So our agenda for today is as follows. Why do we need better partnerships? Why is this such a crucial conversation? Who are your stakeholders and your allies, organizations and individuals? We're going to share with you a visual of what a good partnership model contains in terms of its components. And then we'll talk about some of the sensitivities and nuances. Actually, one of our speakers will, to make those partnerships as successful as possible and to fill in the gaps that we have in our present workforce system. And then we have a wonderful panel of speakers that I'll be introducing later on. And then we want to hear from you, right? So we're going to have questions and answers, and we're also going to have open discussion. So I have already noticed in the chat that many people are saying we need an informational portal. Absolutely. So we're going to be creating and announcing a portal where you can all talk to each other. And we also have an international resource that we'll be talking about today as well, so you can connect and learn about what other countries are doing with this. So why do we need better partnerships? Well, we have to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. And in order to do that, we need to accelerate the pace of implementation of the solutions. That means there isn't room for inefficiencies. And employers from the world of energy efficiency and clean energy cannot come to everybody's advisory committee meetings. So, I'm from Detroit, just from Detroit alone, right? We've got 5 community colleges. We've got over a dozen, really over 2 dozen community-based organizations that are working in this space. And if we all had advisory committees and the clean energy employers had to come to every single one, they would have less time to install systems. And that's a real problem. So we have to figure out how to collaborate with our partnerships in a way that really helps these clean energy employers accelerate their implementation of solutions. We must collaborate and share information about the need for green skills. There's no reason for us to each create our own set of what are the green skills that are needed. And we have to provide coordinated wraparound resources and student success services, and appreciate what case managers from community-based organizations can do to help increase the success for students and reskilling employees that are coming from marginalized communities. We can do better than we're doing, and we're going to explore that today. So, who are your collaborators? Your core collaborators are essential to their partnership. They need to meet regularly. And your secondary collaborators are those who don't need to meet every single time, but they're essential to success. And they're only invited at certain times for certain issues. So let's get down into the practicalities of this. The core collaborators are the employers, and they may be not individual employers. They might be a trade association. And your employers, by the way, aren't just the clean energy businesses, right? They're also governments and nonprofits, lots of different places where people would work that could help build the clean energy economy. They are also community-based organizations, are our core collaborators for a good partnership. And the educators, obviously, the community colleges, the for-profit, the nonprofit organizations, and also universities. Now, within those educational organizations, there are career centers. Now, oftentimes the companies just call on the career centers and say, I want to post a job, and then they don't get people applying for the job. They can't figure out that they've got to go beyond that. Academic advisors who are recruiting students and answering questions about the clean energy field, and they need to be included. And also the faculty and the dean, not only of standalone programs, but also workforce programs and also related programs where you can integrate these materials in, right? Heating, cooling, and air, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. I only taught it for 42 years, right? You'd think I'd know how to pronounce it by now. Electricity, automotive courses, manufacturing programs, all of those can have these materials integrated in. Apprentice and pre-apprenticeship, There's often a coordinator for that in an organization, and also, of course, unions. So who are the secondary collaborators? Funders. Absolutely, we need them. Not in every single meeting. And it's not just the state energy offices, although let me point out that state energy offices have received many millions of dollars. One state received 14 million, another state just received 10 million, but it's other funders as well. And many of these organizations have their own streams of funding that can also feed into this, and understanding that helps. Permitting organizations. I just heard a story the other day of somebody where everybody was on board. People were trained, the employers were there, the solar park was all scheduled to go, and a small township said, we're not getting money from this because it's outside our township, but we have permitting possibilities, so we're going to refuse it. So you have to bring them in early on to get the buy-in so they don't kill projects. Manufacturers associations, or at least information from the manufacturers. And then there's always those contractors that aren't engaged yet. You know, the heating and cooling contractors who are still installing fossil fuel furnaces, and they're oversizing them so they're running inefficiently, just for example, right? So engaging those contractors so they start to do, you know, the cold climate heat pumps, the electricians who would start to add solar onto what they do, for example. And this helps to build the economy because we have to ramp up the implementation, and policymakers at both the local, regional, and state and national levels, and workforce boards. That's a lot of collaborators. Now, I know that for many, you have regulations, like at community colleges, there's Perkins rules, and you have to have your own advisory committee. But just imagine being a solar company and being asked to come to, 15 different advisory committees that are in the region that you work. So it would make a lot more sense if there was a convener, and any of these groups can be the convener from the core collaborators list, and invite everybody else to come and have more effective advisory committee meetings that then you can coordinate with each other, the services that you're offering. So sorry about this, Barb. So here's a diagram. Edie, thank you very much. She put this together after our discussions, and you can see that in the center are these core collaborators, and they all connect with each other. Like, for instance, apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. Unions have those. Employers are needed because, they sponsor the students, right? And of course, community colleges and other training organizations. You can see where all of these fit in. And community-based organizations, we couldn't draw lines without it causing problems, but there should be lines from community-based organizations to every other group in here because they're so key, particularly if we want a diverse workforce and inclusive economy. They're key. And then you can see the secondary collaborators, and I've already talked about all of them, so I'm not going to do any more with that right now. That just says other funders at the bottom if you're seeing that black bar. Okay, so there are ongoing gaps between employers and community colleges and other training organizations. What are those gaps? Well, I'm not going to go into all the details today, but it was called out quite bluntly in a very insightful article from the American Association of Community Colleges and Harvard, in the Harvard Business School, did a report with AACC, and we're putting that link into the chat for you. Strongly recommend that you look at that and that you share that with whoever your management is in whatever organizations. Even if you're not a community college or an employer, this could still have a lot of insights for you. So we want to hear about your clean energy job success stories. We know the money is starting to roll out. We know the activity is ramping up. And we have been told that the elected officials, many of whom stuck their necks way out in order to get the climate bill passed. It was called the IRA, but it really had a lot of things in it, but it definitely was a big climate bill. They need to hear about the success stories. We need to do thank yous to them. And we have a coalition of youth across the country who are doing that work. In fact, Evie is one of the leaders in that group. Thank you, Evie Mengel Cove. She's with Change the Chamber. And so they need to hear the stories from you. And they've actually asked, they're part of a larger coalition of a few dozen organizations that are doing this work of making sure the political climate stays favorable to good climate regulation and legislation. So please share your stories with us. We have a form that we're putting into the chat. We've got about 11 examples already from you from previous Alliance meetings, but we definitely need more. So please take the time. It could be an individual story. You know, Susan, who came from this neighborhood, had these stressors in her life. Because we could have these wraparound services, we could do outreach, we could help her to see that this could be a career pathway for her. Now she's, you know, that kind of story is fine. Or we trained X number of people who are now working for X number of companies. So it can be on multiple levels. Like what Vaughn is going to present today is just a great success story and pieces of what Rhonda's doing today. All right, I've talked about the speakers. Let me introduce them. Delmar. I think there's an I missing in there. Delmar, I apologize. Delmar Gillius from Elevate. So Delmar is, I'll let him describe Elevate, but he's the kind of person you listen to and you go, I never thought of that before. And he's really got a great understanding of how we can work better together. And so he will be talking about those sensitivities and nuances to make partnerships work. And I'll say more about his work later on. Vaughn Woodruff is from Revision Energy, and they're in Maine, and they're just a great example of how to build partnerships and then accelerate the implementation of solutions and prepare the workforce at the same time. And that was an understatement. So I really appreciate him taking time out. And Delmar's on vacation, by the way, taking time out to be here with us today. And also we'll have Rhonda McNutt. Rhonda is with the Bank of America, and she is a leader in so many ways, not only just in the partnership space, but in understanding what it takes to build thriving economies when you have marginalized communities, and how we can shift the norms and how we behave so that we fix it not only for now but for later on. And thank you so much for being with us. Now, Laura had to actually be at a mechanical Contractors Association conference, so she's created a video for us. She's from United Association. This is the one of the big unions. And they have extensive training in this area, and she's got opportunities for partnerships. So you'll be hearing from her today as well. So now I want to hand it over to Delmar, and I'll do this slide however you want. We can do them one at a time, or I can put them all up there. And
feel free, Deborah. You can put them all up. And
okay.
Thanks for the very kind and generous introduction. And yes, my name was spelled and listed correctly.
Good.
So thank you for that. But once again, I just wanted to say good afternoon to everyone. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be on. My name is Delmar Gillis. I'm with an organization called Elevate. And Elevate works primarily in the Midwest. We're based in Chicago, but we have people really across the country, and our focus is on ensuring everyone has access to clean air, clean water, and clean energy, with a specific focus on marginalized communities. And Deborah, you really kind of framed just the points that I wanted to cover really well. It's really all about collaboration, it's about communication, and it's about getting engaged at the community level. I'm just going to share a couple of really quick kind of anecdotes and then kind of hit through the bullets. But in Illinois, Illinois is a state that's roughly 40% diverse. And one of the challenges that we had was, how do you implement a clean energy economy and address our climate issues if you're not engaging with everyone in the state? Our climate challenges are real, and these are not the kinds of challenges that we can do what we've always done. When you look at the internet, when you look at cable TV, when you look at cell phones, when you look at a lot of problems that our country has solved, usually they get solved for affluent communities first, and then underserved communities kind of bring up the rear. If we use that approach with the climate challenge, we're not going to be able to meet our goals. And so there was a real focus on Illinois, or in Illinois, on how do we engage with everybody and create opportunities. When you look at a state as large as Illinois, with as many people as Illinois, it is a scary thing to think that the number of Black female-run clean energy companies is in the less than 1% range, with all the opportunity that's out there. So we know that we had to do more, and we worked on some legislation to do that. The challenge, though, was how do we move this legislation forward, and how do we engage everyone in the process? And the good news, what came down to one word, and that one word was to listen, which is part of the first bullet there. Part of what Illinois did when we were working on our clean energy legislation is we really listened to community-based organizations and built the solutions from literally the ground up. So we started with CBOs, we started with community-based organizations, and we asked questions like, what do we need to do to engage underserved communities? What are some of the climate interventions that would be helpful in your community? Who should be involved? How should they be involved? And what we learned very quickly was that there are a lot of assets at the community level. So rather than talking about communities from the context of what they don't have and what they need, we really looked at it from the standpoint of what community-based organizations, especially in the environmental clean energy space, have, and how can those assets be utilized. And so that's kind of the context of how we built the legislation, and really ties into these sensitivities and nuances that are there that I wanted to just kind of briefly share. And then I'm definitely happy afterwards to dig into questions. But really quickly, some of the things that we really focused on when we were working on our climate legislation were things like, how do you build and structure partnerships? When we've tried this before, typical situations are you give a whole lot of money to mediaries that claim to be engaged with the community, but then when you have conversations about how it connects to the community, often those connections weren't there. And so having a structure, whether it's community colleges or small businesses or state agencies, where community groups are equal partners. So they're brought in early at the planning phase. How many of us have been part of programs and projects where the community group is brought in after the award has been won, and then there's like, hey, let's go find some subs that can do outreach to bring people into our program? What we heard from community groups is, let's structure the program to work at the community level. Things that were asked for and requested were case management support, job placement services, access to tools, access to coaches and mentors, retention services. All of these things need scope, they need partnerships, and they need collaboration. What we're starting to learn is that when you have a partnership between a community college and a community group, and you look at it from an asset-based perspective, there is a lot of synergy there. And so a lot of these bullets that we kind of go through are really around equal partnership, building deep relationships with community-based organizations that are focused on diversity and underserved communities. It's really based on making sure that there's scope built into the project so that the community-based organizations can help with more than just recruiting and community communication, doing things like case management, supporting workers once they get on the job with retention support, being an outlet for additional coaching, certifications, et cetera. And what you start to see when you do that is you have community level engagement. You have those that have historically been left behind, engaged in the process, and you have a solution that's built at the community level that will meet our goals. And so, like I said, I am just so excited to talk about this topic. And I told Deborah I could probably go on for 2 or 3 hours on this. But hopefully what we're going to see is, rather than the approaches of the past, where money gets distributed and then community groups get brought in on the tail end as a sub to help with communication and recruiting, we start to see these richer conversations that lead to richer partnerships, such that not only are the communities benefiting, but we're also seeing a sustainable approach that can benefit not just our clean energy community development, but economic development across multiple sectors of our economy. So Deborah, I will kind of pull up there. I'm always happy to, like I said, answer questions at the end or follow up offline, but this is a very important topic that I'm really excited that we're having a conversation around. Thanks again, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So we really were wonderfully advantaged by Delmar's willingness to step into this in Illinois and to work with organizations that had had difficult interactions in the past, and to set a tone where we could listen to each other and we could build trust, and we could set it up so that we could move forward in a way that would be really so beneficial for students, not just in clean energy, but in all sorts of programs. So I just have a deep respect and appreciation for Delmar and his work as part of Elevate, but also just for him as a person. Thank you, Delmar. And it's not something that happens quickly, right? And sometimes people in certain organizations are like, we want to be the elephant in the room. We want to be the ones that control it all. We want to get all the money. And so then other people on the team have to turn to them and say, wait, what we want is what's going to work best for the community, and particularly marginalized communities. And so this work is really quite crucial. Okay, so let's go on. And our next speaker is Vaughn. And once again, I'm so pleased he could take off from what he does. And you can go ahead and share the screen and tell us about your fantastic work at Revision Energy.
Thanks, Deb. It's always good to share time with you. And thank you all for having me today. As Deb mentioned, my name is Vaughn Woodruff. I'm the director of the Revision Energy Training Center. Just going to give you a little background on our company so you know I'm not just here for myself. I'm also here on behalf of my nearly 400 co-owners. Revision Energy is an employee-owned B Corp. We are based up in northern New England. For those of you not familiar with certified B Corps, they're businesses that write into our legal documents that our stakeholders are more than just the folks who reap financial benefit. So it's our community, it's the environment. Through our work, we've been recognized as a best for the world company, meaning we're in the top 10% of B Corps around the planet, specifically for our policies and procedures related to our workers. And we, as you can see here, we have 5 locations. We started up in Mid-Coast, Maine. We have a branch in South Portland, Maine, 2 branches in New Hampshire, and 1 in northern Massachusetts. And our mission as a company is, I think, shows beyond just being a electrical contractor working in the solar space. You know, our big picture is to make life better by building our just and equitable electric future. And as a company doing work in Maine and New Hampshire, we have some fairly unique workforce pressures. I'm going to show you real quickly a graph. I'm on the workforce board here in the state, and at our Q4 meeting, this graph was put on the board to show what happens when you're the oldest state in the country. And this is a graph that shows the natural change that's happening in Maine between births and deaths. And that trend is not a good one, not for our communities. And for, Revision Energy's been in business for 20 years. We're planning to be in business for decades to come. That just and equitable electrical future isn't going to happen overnight. And so this is the climate that we work in. And so it's really, pushed us to think about how we address this bottleneck. With the Inflation Reduction Act passing, and climate goals at a national level, we now have some targets to shoot for, and there's money to do it. But as I'm sure many folks know here, all of the hoping and policy in the world isn't going to bring workers to the table to do this work. It's going to take intentionality. Way that we do that is through the Revision Energy Training Center. And this image here shows the services that we provide internally for our company through that workforce journey. We're engaged in pre-apprenticeship, and we'll talk a little bit about that to widen the funnel of folks who are aware of the opportunities that are here for them within the industry. We have an electrical apprenticeship program that we've had in place since 2018. And we're in the process of either having launched or will be launching for additional apprenticeships that are listed here. We also support the professionals within the company by helping to track their credentialing documentation and stay on top of that, as well as to connect them with continuing education, since that's a lifelong journey in an industry that's always changing. It's critically important that we're staying ahead of it. And we invest $1,000 per year per employee in continuing education that they can choose, as well as through the apprenticeship programs that we have internally. Now, we're going to highlight a couple of the things that we're doing. We have a number of things, and these two felt most germane to the conversation today. One is pre-apprenticeship. So we really have started to lean in on pre-apprenticeship as we look at how to widen the funnel. Maine, we've been very fortunate. One of my colleagues, Tag Wango from the Governor's Energy Office, is on this call. They received some of the ARPA funding that came down to Maine and channeled it through the Clean Energy Partnership to incentivize the growth of the clean energy industry. And our Maine Department of Labor also, from ARPA funds, made investments through grants to expand apprenticeship, which is what we're leveraging. And one of the partnerships that we engaged in through the Maine Apprenticeship Program funding was a collaboration with Portland Adult Education. I really appreciated Delmar's presentation on community-based organizations because, as an organization committed to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we have a commitment to that. But we're a solar construction company. We like to think we can do a lot of things well, but there are a lot of organizations that have been doing a lot of work in the trenches for a long time that we don't want to reinvent the wheel on, and we could never be as successful in our endeavors without collaborating with them. And so what we did was we co-developed with Portland Adult Education a renewable energy careers pre-apprenticeship. Portland Adult Ed is the largest service provider for new Mainers. We have a number of refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants from Africa, the Middle East, up into Eastern Europe that have been moving into the region and actually represent the ability for Maine to grow a workforce. And so what we have done is launched an 8-week program that is focused on heat pump and solar careers to do a couple of things. One is to give folks tangible skills and credentials that they can use to be more competitive in their efforts to move into these types of careers. The other is to use the supportive services, both from Portland Adult Education and the various workforce boards, to make sure that those wraparound services, the English language learning, the making sure folks have accessibility to driver's education to get the licenses that they'll need to be successful in our industry, are able to do that. And when folks graduate from this program, the first cohort launched about a week and a half ago, and folks who complete this program will have an automatic interview with us for our apprenticeship programs. It doesn't mean they'll necessarily get hired, but as part of this program, we're also helping to tool up their skills to be able to be competitive in that process. Been really excited about this program. We had our first 8-week session. Those of you who've been involved in community development work will know sometimes getting the first people in the seats is hard. We had 44 applicants for our first 15 seats. We ended up screening them based on work authorization readiness and experience. The first cohort consists of new Mainers from 6 African nations, civil engineers, electrical engineers. And this is an untapped opportunity, especially in our industry where our credentialing bodies are still fairly new. We don't have those legacy credentials. And this really gives an opportunity to mobilize folks who have rich experiences from where they started their careers into where they want to build them now. We have also brought 3 additional employers to the table to help out so that as we see opportunities that either are a better match for the pre-apprentices, or if we just can't take on the highly qualified folks that we're seeing all within our company, that there are other pathways there. And through this pre-apprenticeship, we in the grant funding are planning 4 sessions through the next 2 years, including one in the fall, and really looking forward to how we can learn from this to spread it elsewhere. And then on the community side, looking forward, we've always been involved in community outreach, whether it's being in the schools to teach about solar. A lot of our efforts have historically been with schools that we're putting solar on. So there's a little bit of philanthropy in that, but also a little bit of complementary symbiosis of, let's get out there and teach, and let's also make sure that we're getting these schools a clean energy future. We noticed through that talking about climate is a really tough thing for young people who want to engage in it, but it can feel overwhelming. We have an amazing marketing team, and I'd like to introduce you to Sunsquatch, who is our conveyor of climate solutions that we take into the schools. We have activity books, et cetera, that we do. We even have Sunsquatch comes to some of our events. You can see in the background is a tiny house. We actually were able to buy this with co-op funds that we get from manufacturers for promotion for the amount of stuff that we buy, and it's outfitted with solar panels, heat pump, batteries, et cetera, so folks can see up front what it is. We bring it out to schools, allow students to engage with it and to learn about it. And as the marketing team has been recognizing that we have kind of unparalleled demand that we never saw, the industry historically has been a survival mindset. And we are no longer in that. We're in a growth mindset. And with workforce as our bottleneck, we're recognizing the tools we built to help with climate, we can use to help reframe what these opportunities look like for folks, especially at the middle school age as they're thinking about their careers. And so a recent campaign that we launched is the Electricians Will Save the World campaign, recognizing that if we do not grow electricians, we are never going to meet our climate goals. So we are getting out. We have a whole campaign. I will post we can post the link in the chat. There's the video that we have done, as well as continued outreach into the schools to help bring these to the forefront. One of our big focal points is on including more women in the trades right now. Less than 2% of electricians in the US are women, and it's a really untapped opportunity for us to include more of the population to really help us pull together to address the climate crisis and really give this thing a fair shot. So, yeah, Deb, I went over time. I figured I would, and thank you for the extra time.
You rock. It's just so delicious. We had one of those little trailers too, and we had it at the college, and we would take it places, and then it would be community fairs, and we would generate, it'd be kind of like that credible force of the community colleges saying that this is a good thing to do. And then the other companies would be around us with their booths, and it was that partnership really made it work. I love the co-op from the manufacturers creating marketing funds for you. And we want to capture that Electricians Will Save the World that you just put into the chat. How incredible. And we're going to be doing more on recruitment. So watch the Alliance events that are coming up, because you will be hearing about it. We know that you all need help with recruitment. And so we're here. I mean, our job is to help you, right? And of course, many of you in this audience today can help each other. So like, hi, Roger, who I think he's tied with me for the oldest renewable energy programs in the country, but I've retired and his is now way more robust. Roger Ebich. I mean, look at the names of the people who were here today, right? It's just so wonderful. And that's why we need a sharing platform. Absolutely. And we will be responding to that. You should be hearing about it soon. Erica wants to know if she can duplicate your marketing materials.
Let's chat.
Okay. Maybe
chat.
not in his direct backyard, right? But
Yeah,
and I don't know how he defines backyard.
My priority is to get Roger to come visit me on this coast. I've seen him on his.
Okay, so I am now going to move on. And it is now, we are privileged to be able to hear from Rhonda McNutt. I reached out to her because I knew she was doing some partnerships with community colleges. And as I learned more and more and more, I just kept saying, oh, you've got to come. You've got to come and tell us what you're doing. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I am going to pull up her slides. Hold on. I know that black bar does not show up on mine, but I will get rid of it for you. But first, let me pull this up for her. Okay, Rhonda, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Deb. So first I have to say that I too want to see if we can duplicate at Bank of America the Sun Squatch. We need a mascot for all this work. So Vaughn, I love the Sun Squatch. But thank you again, Deborah, for having me. Just really glad to be a part of this conversation today. As you said, my name is Rhonda McNutt, and I am a senior program manager with the Bank of America Charitable Foundation. And I'm primarily responsible for leading our initiatives and national philanthropic investments related to higher education. So as Deb said, community colleges and universities, which really ties in overall to, our job strategy at the bank. So, what that really means is I'm helping to develop partnerships with academic institutions and workforce development organizations that are providing the skills and training that individuals need to build career pathways and pathways that ultimately are going to lead them to long-term success, and especially for our BIPOC talent. What I will tell you that I love about the conversation today is that it does really tie into the work we are continuously evaluating and doing at Bank of America to help advance jobs. And, I thank you for just giving me a few moments to share a little bit of it today, because our primary objective, which is what I've kind of heard throughout the conversation, is to build and deepen partnerships, right? Partnerships that are going to help align and connect diverse populations of skilled talent to the jobs that are most in demand in our communities, and ultimately helping to make their financial lives better. So, we know it's especially important now as we're starting to see sort of that labor market shift and hiring beginning to slow, and companies, are starting to take steps to reduce headcount. So we want to make sure we're there to help kind of, ensure that individuals more and more are getting the education and the skills and the experiences that they need to be competitive and really obtain those career launching in-demand jobs that employers are seeking to fill. But on this particular, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, Deb, what I will tell you is that our framework is really very simple when you think about it. It's about identifying the jobs first, right? The jobs, then the skills, then the training, then the investment, right? It's really just this simple approach that kind of resonates across our company, but it's rooted in that primary idea of meeting local community and employer needs with tangible outcomes of jobs for individuals. So, again, kind of starting with jobs first, which we kind of think about it as data first, right? What are the jobs? What does research tell us about the in-demand industries and jobs that are available, right? What employers are hiring? Where do we see the most job growth? Where are those livable wage jobs? And just really trying to understand what the current trends in the workforce and labor market are, right? And we know that job demand is going to come from a range of employers, right? But we want to work with them to really understand what's the most critical jobs that need to be filled, and not just any jobs, right, but jobs that are going to provide that family sustaining wage and opportunities for advancement. So we want to bring all the stakeholders together, have a dialogue around this, as well as a dialogue around the skills and the training that job seekers need, to really influence the commitments to hire. So what are those skills needed to obtain the jobs that are most in need of filling now and in the future, right? What are the skills gaps of our talent pipeline? And then who's taking that critical task of providing individuals with the technical and soft skills needed to be prepared for those jobs that have been identified? So we're having very pointed conversations with nonprofits, higher education institutions, and others who are offering that training that is really going to support a successful transition into critical jobs. And then just on this slide, finally, after we've kind of evaluated all the information and we have somewhat of a handle on the most pressing needs in our community, we then consider what are those strategic investments that are going to provide the greatest solution, right? What's that human capital? What is that funding? And also, how are we tracking this, right? How are we going to share what the outcomes are and how we can scale this more broadly? So it's really this high-level strategy that's sort of our guiding light, if you will, as to how we think about building effective workforce partnerships. But on the next slide, when we think about the how, right, how we're implementing our job strategy, we do approach it from kind of two different angles. So there's first this integrated approach among internal businesses within Bank of America. And then second is through that collaborative effort with external partners. And you'll see that illustrated on the next slide. But just to touch a little bit on our internal enterprise work, what we do really stems from a long-standing focus that we've had on workforce development or in workforce development overall, whether that's been helping young people find their first work opportunity or preparing first-time college graduates who are starting out in their profession, or even reskilling adults, to ultimately achieve maybe this newfound career success. But what is clear in our role today is that we must go beyond simply funding job training programs, right? We really need to think differently about our own approach to hiring, and across the company, we really have to be intentional about taking the steps necessary to move jobs overall forward through innovative programs and initiatives, but most certainly through meaningful and inclusive partnerships. And let me just say that, we're engaged in this work because our company, quite honestly, is committed to creating job opportunities, right? Especially for those that are facing barriers to employment. And the focus on jobs from a strategic standpoint is really embedded among many of the businesses within the bank. But looking at this slide, I think I would say, just to point out, a few key areas where jobs is really embedded in each of these businesses' strategy. And then through that collective work of these teams, we're trying to work better to help connect individuals to overall workforce in general, but most importantly, of course, livable wage jobs. So if I could just touch on a few of these here very quickly. So starting with our local markets organization, we do have this, vast team of Bank of America leaders who are physically sitting in our 90+ markets, 97, I think we're at markets, who are executing on the bank's strategies locally, right? So these are the boots on the ground teammates who understand the economy, understand the strengths and challenges of their respective local communities, and are really trying to make sure that they have a good handle on what are the job needs of our communities, right? And so our local market leaders are really that front line that's engaging employers and connecting companies to the local community partners for that employer-informed career pathway. So really driving awareness and advocacy and engagement around jobs in their respective regions. We also have a newly formed team that we call the Academy at Bank of America. And they're responsible for creating curated content that's really helping job seekers build professional skills. So, you know, they're providing module-based professional development training webinars that are focusing on topics that are going to help individuals transition into a career, right? Career readiness workshops, financial wellness curriculums, and some skill-specific learning on things like cybersecurity awareness. And these trainings, again, are really meant to prepare individuals for the workforce. But it's training them for the workforce to have, you know, be prepared for jobs, but not for jobs at Bank of America. This content really is shared within our community networks. And hopefully it's going to be a complement to the trainings that are offered by our nonprofit and academic partners. And then, of course, we have our national philanthropic strategy. And, you know, the Bank of America Foundation has always been a key part of helping the company deliver community-focused investments and really equipping the nonprofit sector with resources that they need for sustainability and growth. You know, but there is a definite connection between our national strategy as well as, again, our local strategy, and making sure that we're really making the greatest impact across all communities. And then last but certainly not least, we have our internal hiring practices, and this includes, of course, recruiting efforts at 2-year and 4-year institutions. But I think everybody realizes and understands the whole point around the hiring practices. So if we can just move to the next slide, Deb, and really just kind of get into what I would say is more like I'm going to call it the meat and potatoes of this work. What you saw earlier was more like the appetizers of what we're doing, but here we are with the meat and potatoes. So, you know, it's here through this, you know, through collaborative work with external partners is where we really see that ecosystem of efforts that are being done to move the dial. And I think, you know, this ties in very much so to the slide that you shared earlier, Deb, as well. You know, but our intent as a catalyst of jobs in the community is to help individuals bridge the skills gap, right? Find meaningful employment and improve their financial lives again. So we see our role as a convener for all of this, right? A convener for jobs. And we want to bring together employers, educational institutions, the community-based organizations, and thought leaders to really have innovative conversations and to think about how to bridge employers, you know, skills demands with the skills that are actually being taught by local providers. And, you know, what are those wrap services and the social capital that nonprofits can provide to really help build that trust within the workforce development system, right? And then as well, what is the, you know, the research and advocacy? What do we know about, you know, things that are happening in the workforce space, and what do we want to influence to help bring awareness to critical conversations of an inclusive workforce? But just very quickly, just going back to the first step of our strategy on that very first slide of, you know, the need of tackling jobs in the community starts with identifying the jobs and the demand. For us, that really means starting with employers. So we want to ensure employers are brought to the table. I think I heard this point made earlier, brought to the table early with our partners. And so they're an integral part of the conversation on how to collectively and effectively deliver on jobs for the talent pipeline. And so this means going beyond that traditional idea of partnering with employers, which, you know, it's primarily a funder and a hiring company, but really thinking about what are other ways that we can engage with workforce intermediaries to ensure more people are obtaining and retaining high demand jobs. So serving as an advisor, or, you know, being at the table to talk about what are the partner trainings and curriculums to make sure that it's, you know, up to date with the skills needed in the workforce, or connecting directly with students, right? Leading resume writing sessions or mock interview sessions, or joining panels and being a career coach. So really thinking about how to take what we know and are seeking when it comes to hiring and really sharing that up front so that job seekers are better prepared. And then, of course, the skills and training, we talked about that early on in the strategy as well. So just, bringing in the colleges and universities, making sure that they're there to be able to explore those opportunities to expand on potentially their career programs and just some of the critical training that individuals will need along their career journey. And then the one point I want to bring out too is our thought leaders, right? The thought leaders in the industry that are really using data and research to kind of influence that, the innovative and equitable solutions that are providing for meaningful career pathways. So we have a number of partners that we've aligned to some of our key programs and initiatives to really help our community partners with that change and the action that they want to take, right, so that they can remain viable and resilient. So, all that said, we are engaged in this work because, again, we are committed to building effective partnerships to bridge the jobs versus skills gap and to really find viable solutions to get more people into good, meaningful jobs. So I will stop there, Deb, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. And that was so informative. Can you see all the different levels? Like when she first said it to me, told me all this stuff, I went, wait, aren't you a bank? And then I started to understand that a bank has a vested interest, right? And making sure that their communities are thriving communities. But beyond that, she actually has, I got to stop sharing and share it again to make this work. They have it in their heart. I've had the opportunity to meet the people at the bank who are driving this, and it's wondrous, how incredible their efforts are, and that we need to be more connected to them, right, than we are. Okay, so then we have the unions, and we haven't really we've had unions in all of these alliance meetings, but we haven't necessarily had a union come to speak. So we spent some great time with Laura Sija, and she put this together for us because she couldn't be here in person. I don't even have to cue it up. Listen to this because it's so exciting.
Greetings. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this introduction on partnering with the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry, or what is commonly known as the UA, to learn more about careers in energy and infrastructure. My name is Laura Seja, Special Representative for Training and Outreach. I work with our International Training Fund to recruit and attract new members into our registered apprenticeship programs. I'm also a journeyman plumber, pipe fitter, and 26-year member of UA Local 761 in Burbank, California. The UA has been around for 134 years and is COE accredited and registered with the Department of Labor Apprenticeship. The UA consists of these skilled trades pictured here that include mechanical drafter, residential light commercial service technician, HVACR service technician, plumber, pipe fitter, sprinkler fitter, and welder. The UA operates under the building trades umbrella that is North America's Building Trades Unions, or NABTU. We are one of the highest skilled building trades, and as you will see on the next few slides, we have quite a bit of work on the horizon and a robust training program that extends across North America. Energy infrastructure accounts for nearly 50% of all hours worked by NABTU's 3 million members and remains one of the strongest areas for growth for the unionized construction industry. How does the UA fit into the new green or clean energy jobs? Our work outlook includes $294 billion for energy infrastructure. Pictured here are district thermal energy network infrastructure, and the UA is responsible for removing outdated systems and installing and maintaining new technology long-term. Also included here is commercial and residential water-to-air heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, wastewater energy transfer systems, solar thermal, and thermal energy storage. The UA has a long-standing registered apprenticeship program and pays equal to or greater than prevailing wages, which allows us to meet the requirements laid out in the Inflation Reduction Act for clean energy projects. We also meet the requirements for a diverse membership, including women and underrepresented workers, as well as providing opportunities to disadvantaged workers. This is not only part of our labor agreements, but part of our UA Constitution. How does the UA fit into the new green or clean energy jobs? Our work outlook includes here the heat pump water heater systems in a residential application. This is a close-up of HVACR service technicians, how they're implementing air-to-water commercial heat pump water heating. Our apprenticeship program includes 5 years of both on-the-job and classroom training. If your programs offer training, there may be opportunities in your area to partner or place your graduates into our apprenticeship program locations. We have over 300 training centers located in North America. Our members apprentice under seasoned certified workers to learn on the job and must complete 10,000 hours of on-the-job training, as well as complete 1,200 hours of classroom instruction. The apprentices turn out as journey workers with up to 45 college credits. Some of our classrooms may look like this, and some more may look like this. So why choose the UA? Our building trades apprenticeship has a lot in common with community colleges, but is a little bit different, except for one thing. We have the education for our members' entire career. The rapid pace of never-ending changes in technology and legislation to meet the demands of industry require constant tradesperson upskilling. We have technologically advanced training centers located across the United States and Canada. If you'd like to connect directly with a local training director, I have a QR code on the last slide where you can enter your information. We spend over $300 million yearly on our training programs. Here's a short virtual walkthrough of just one of our many training centers. And finally, let's talk about equity in apprenticeship. We have many programs supporting women and underrepresented workers in our trades, including Tradeswomen Build Nations, which is pictured here. We recently approved a pregnancy benefit and have various childcare pilots throughout the country to support our members. If you'd like to encourage anyone to join the UA, please send them to ua.org/join to complete a form to start a career profile with us. You can also visit us on the World Wide Web at our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. If your organization is interested in collaborating with our training centers on career paths related to HVACR, plumbing, and piping systems, please fill out this form found at bit.ly link or on the QR code. We will share your information and connect you directly with the program nearest you. Please feel free to contact me via phone or email, and I want to thank you for your time. I do hope you enjoy your conference, and a special thanks to Deborah Rowe and her dedication to the green industry, of which we are all part of this global community. Thank you.
So that was pretty sweet, right? Yes. We're putting into the chat that link, this bit.ly UA Collaborate. We structured this talking to her so that we can then go ahead and we're going to take whoever signs up on there and connect you to the local union. So local unions are the ones that make the decision as to whether they're going to work with you as a training organization or as an employer. They can't do it through the national. Just so you know, their curricula is paid for, I believe it's by the dues, but there's something about it where they can't share their curricula, but they can acknowledge curricula that you have and that you're using, and with either the pre-apprenticeship level or sometimes the apprenticeship level as well. So if you haven't connected with your local UA, we encourage you to do so. And of course, they're not the only union, but look at how collaborative they were in what they're suggesting. Okay, so fill out the form and then she'll connect you, and hopefully that the local union is as interested as the national. And if it's not, you may like contact back to the national office who's connecting you and say, can you help me with this? So there it is, it's in the chat. All right, you've had these great speakers. We have a couple of additional resources, and then we're going to open it up. We want to hear from you. We want to network. We want to talk, and use the chat to collaborate. So nationally, there's this thing, if you haven't heard of it, called the White House Talent Pipeline Challenge. And they are collecting strategies and useful energy examples. I will not tell you it's comprehensive. I don't think it is, but you may, learn a few things. So there's a link on that. And then there was a recent White House event for colleges and universities around these workforce issues. And so we have the link for you for that in the chat. And then the third link, I literally just got yesterday, so I didn't even adjust the slide this morning. But because of Women's History Month, there is an event tomorrow, and it's on women entrepreneurs in this space. And so it was an invitation to a White House briefing, and I looked and I could share it with people. So I'm sharing my invitation with all of you so that if you've never done one of those White House briefing things, they're fun to do, and you can learn a lot, and sometimes you can figure out who you're supposed to connect with. So those are all in the chat. Okay. I want to thank the IREC and the National Council for Workforce Education for stepping up to the plate on building this alliance. Especially want to thank NCWE for, I went to them and said, we got to do this. And the head of NCWE said, okay, let's do it. And they are the workforce and occupational deans in community colleges throughout the country. And so I just want to appreciate them. Okay, so let's see. Let's hear from you. So there may be some questions and answers that you put into the chat. We want to make sure to highlight those. And so I'm going to stop looking at these slides with you so that I can see the chat. But we want to hear who has successful partnerships besides the folks that have talked today. We want to hear about your strategies. We also want to hear about what didn't work. We always talk about best practices. Sometimes when you fail, that's where the best ideas come from for what do you do next. And when you tell us what you did that failed, then maybe other people don't have to go through that. So we want to hear about your strategies, your lessons learned from those that were successful and those that were not. And if you have specific links, look, this is an all hands on deck to try and keep this planet livable right now, right? And to prevent massive human suffering. So if for your program or those that you know of, if you can, the more you can give us specific links, the better it'll be. I got to tell you that this can be shared not only through the Alliance, but also Evie and I have a meeting tomorrow with 43 countries around the world where we're having a very similar meeting to today, looking at workforce policies and programs. And so we'll be sharing back with you what we learned from the international audience as well. But here's a taste of the international perspectives and resources. There are knowledge items in the Green Learning Network. If you just look up Green Learning Network at the Green Forum, and you can join. Also, we have an international community on education for green jobs if you want to get invited to those things. And I think, are we putting links in the chat, Edie? I think so on that, right?
Yeah, I'm putting them in the chat.
Okay, great. So now let's go to question and answer and open discussion. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stop looking as professional and so that I can see your chat. Okay. We're not at thank you for your time yet, because I really want to see what you want to talk about. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Evie or Janelle or anybody who's been watching this chat, what do you see as questions? Okay. So Evie said, there's a question, do the union training centers focus on attracting and supporting minority trainees? How diverse are the programs currently? So let me share with you, I used to run the Detroit Green Skills Alliance for a while, right? So we brought together community-based organizations and employers and training organizations and government, and we tried to address what were the common bottlenecks that we were all facing in growing the green economy in Detroit. And at the time, we were reaching out from, which, believe it or not, the United Way to unions to say, are you ready now? Can we bring you people from marginalized neighborhoods, from different backgrounds than those? I don't know about you. I grew up with the stereotype that to get into the union, it had to be your dad or your uncle, and you had to be a white guy. That was my stereotype growing up. So I learned two things. I learned that that wasn't true for all unions. There was some of that going on for sure. But that many of them have had a history of trying to open up the diversity and to be more welcoming and to understand some of the wraparound services that are needed and to be better with retention. So what I would say is that there's been kind of an exponential change going on. It may not have come down to your local union, and if it hasn't, this Laura Seja, she's so committed to this, and they've got these special programs. I don't have the stats on it. I'd have to ask her. She has stats on it, but she's not here live today. So very good question. And let's all of us support them in continuing to open up their doors to a more diverse population. My work with the Detroit Green Skills Alliance was, I don't know, like 12 years ago, and they were doing it then, but it was the beginning of what I would say was more of that exponential shift, which I was glad to see. Okay, and then there's a bunch of resources in here about how WRISE, that's Women in Renewable, I forget what it stands for, Ann. I'm so sorry. If you want to put it in the chat or unmute yourself, you can remind me. But they had a virtual career fair with grid alternatives with 500 job seekers, and the majority were diverse women. Oh, isn't that great? So you want to do more of that. I think that's a great idea. So yeah, we should discuss that. And it's also recruitment into the training as well as the placement at the other end. When you work with community colleges, you've got to get to the faculty person who's teaching the program. They're the ones that tell the students about the jobs. Students only at some schools will go to the Career Center. So you've got to get to the people who are teaching the courses. Thank you, Ann. Women of Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy. I should have known that by heart. Okay, there's a global one I get it confused with. Delmar, what type of strategies would you recommend to help communities of color look at jobs in the skilled trades? How do we work with employers to repair past inequities? You're on mute.
That's a good question, Deborah, because as you mentioned, a lot of people of color are still experiencing a lot of the realities that you talked about. But to your point, there are also specific unions and individuals within unions that are working to change that and to help us advance. And so one of the things I would say that's really important is, one, to identify individuals like Ms. Seja that are working on programs that align with bringing women of color, people of color. In the Chicagoland area, for instance, there's an organization called Hire 360, which is really focused on bringing Black and Brown in the skilled trades, especially the electricians union, the carpenters union, and the laborers, which have historically been really tough nuts for African Americans to get access to. The other thing is really starting to work well, and it's something I'm working on in Illinois, is a partnership with community colleges and using community college training as a bridge to get access to job opportunities and apprenticeships, and then using that as a springboard to getting involved in the labor unions. So those would be kind of two things that I would say is find the diversity leads for the unions that you're interested in and really reach out. But I would say we still have to realize that unfortunately, all of those perceptions are not in the rearview mirror yet, and there's still work to be done on all sides to make sure that you're not just getting a pre-apprenticeship opportunity, but then you're also getting the jobs and the projects and getting hired. And focusing on the back half of that process is really something that I would really push a lot of the diversity leads in organized labor to support. But to your point, Deborah, I'll definitely end on the positive, which there are a lot of people that are fighting to tear down some of the barriers that have historically been in place on the union side, and that's a sign of progress.
There's a follow-up question for you, and it's But I just want to say something about retention. Okay. Companies really have to understand what they need to do to make people feel welcome, to build a culture where you won't have people say things that are not welcoming or even worse, racist, not always on purpose, but they grew up in a racist environment and they don't even know that they are. So there has to be some resources that are put into, my first day on the job, my dean turned to me and said, I don't think you can do this job because you're a girl, but I'll let you try. And for 4 years, I couldn't say anything about it till I got tenure. And then I walked into his office. I said, you will never speak to another woman the way you just spoke to me. And I had the department give a vote of no confidence for it. And he was called on the carpet for it. And then we helped him go through because lots of times he was like, oh, I didn't realize. He was a nice guy, but he needed extra professional development and bringing that professional development to people. I also want to point out SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, has a great diversity person. I can't remember her name right now, but she's wonderful. And you call their offices. She's a great ally for you from within. All right, here's the follow-up question. How do you bring CBOs into the process from the beginning if there will need to be a competitive procurement for the services that CBOs can offer?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to go ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just really quickly, I believe it was Wallace, had a question on connecting CBOs and community colleges. Deb, I can't respond in the chat, but if you want to put my email address in there, I'm happy to follow up with Tracy.
Okay.
With iGen and others.
Okay.
But to the question, and once again, refresh my memory, what was it?
So the question is, so like in Illinois, we don't have that issue of needing to do a competitive procurement for the services that CBOs offer because they're encouraging partnerships to apply. But yeah, how do you bring CBOs into the process from the beginning if there will need to be a competitive procurement for the services that CBOs can offer?
A couple of quick things, because I know there's other topics that we want to get to. One is attack it during the policy making. One of the things we did in Illinois was really center the access to the funding to partnering with CBOs. So basically, if you read the legislation in Illinois around the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which I'm also happy to share with folks, it is very CBO centric, which helps drive that conversation. So that's one thing, is attack it at the policy level. The other thing that really works is to have coalitions reach out to the groups that are basically putting the RFIs out and starting to really push them to, one, transparency, two, to ensure that they understand the importance of working with CBOs. And one of the things that we have actually been partnering with Illinois, the state of Illinois on, is creating a rubric that puts an emphasis on working with CBOs, hiring Black and brown workers, hiring women workers, hiring folks that have been displaced by fossil fuel job losses. Those are all priority participants in the program. And so by putting an emphasis on those things with the groups that are putting the RFIs out and RFPs, what we're starting to see is that by us continually working and partnering with them, a lot of the things that are of passion to us are starting to show up in the RFPs. So that would be the two things I'd recommend, are the policy path, but then also before the RFPs come out, establishing relationships and expectations around engagement with underserved audiences.
Yeah, that's great. So a lot of people asking about, can I get the slides? And yes, you will get the slides. That's correct, right? Janelle and Michelle, they're going to get the slides. And you will.
Yes, they are opt-in.
Okay, so if you sign into that opt-in form, and even maybe you can put it in again, then you will get the slides. You will get the recording, correct, Janelle? And then also, Cynthia, thank you so very much, is taking the chat, and she is putting it into a set of resources, because this chat is absolutely delicious, isn't it? Filled with all sorts of resources. And I know that it's, I think it's set up, you guys can't save it. So she's going to go through and take out anything that's like, direct messages to each other and stuff. But, and then we're going to get that out to you too. So I wanted to hit, there's also the DEI person is named in the chat. So take a look at that, Erica, and resources. There's links in there. And what I've done is you can click on the links, it opens up in your windows and then you can harvest them after, but we will also get that to you. So how do you see states here's another question. How do you see states mobilizing ahead of the Inflation Reduction Act funds to create learning pathways for clean tech, climate tech, like solar storage, EV charging, EE, heat pump install? Are there emerging models that they're aligning on? Are they leaning hard on the community college system or something else? So do we have somebody from the National Association of State Energy Offices here on this call? Because if so, we will ask you to unmute. And you can talk about that. My sense is that they are talking with each other, but they are being given a lot of leeway. There's guidelines that have come out from DOE and other places, other agencies. But you really should be contacting your own state energy office so that you can have some say into what they are creating. Before we had the Alliance, through the Seed Center that NCWE runs, we ran a roundtable where we give recommendations to these policymakers, and so that we could learn from the ARA funds that came out. We hope that they have integrated that in, but those guidelines, are just coming out, and definitely contact your state energy office about this. And we've had speakers in the past that spoke to it, but maybe we need to do more in the future as well. Okay, so we've only got 10 minutes left. We're seeing some people saying our community college quit teaching this stuff. Now what do we do? And so I think you need to go back to the community college and say, let us explain what's going on. And if you need help, we can provide you with materials and data. But you have to show them their jobs. So you've got to convene the companies who can say, yes, this is our plan for hiring, and we need a ramp up. It might make sense to ramp it up on the workforce side of the house first, which is going to be more flexible because it takes a while to get it back into the for credit occupational side. But going with flexible schedules and stackable credentials would be helpful anyway. Okay. What do you think, people who've been watching the chat? What are like the key? It's so hard to pick from the different questions. What should we do here?
Hey, Deb, this is Rhonda McNutt. I wanted to see if I could just add a little bit on the questions that are coming up around, the students of color and getting the focus on, I guess I'll call it green jobs, right, back into the community college. So one of the things that I didn't get a chance to share in my slides, I wanted to make sure we had time to have this conversation, but one of the initiatives that we have at Bank of America, we're calling it the Signature Jobs Initiative. And right now it is a partnership with 21 colleges and universities across the country to really try to, train our students in terms of being ready for careers and just even that skill specific, what they're looking for in terms of the profession and the careers that they want to get into. And there's one university in particular where I think, and let me just say, with this initiative, what we did was allow these colleges and universities to kind of say, what do you think, right, you need to do? What needs to happen? How do you want to support your students? We offered $1 million over 4 years to each of the colleges and universities, but it was really, what do you want to do, right? And one of the universities out of this, I think they've come up with some really great, ideas around how they want to leverage that funding. And one of them is having connections with employers where they're actually taking students on site visits to visit the employers, right? They're getting kind of that behind the scenes view of what happens. I'm an architect, I'm an engineer, whatever it is, what does that really look like for me being in that role in a professional setting? So there may be opportunities, like when we think about how do we even try to get, some of the students of color to be more exposed and interested in some of those green roles, doing things like that could be helpful. Like that's an opportunity to partner and connect with employers to really bring visibility to it. And it's also allowing employers to see, we got great talent that could probably do a fantastic job in these roles, right? Let's bring them in.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I also want to hit on a couple of other things. So through the U.S. partnership, you know, I have this other role where I'm president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. And we are going to be working on a national recruitment campaign, which, by the way, is of course for women and BIPOC communities and marginalized communities, but it's also for rural communities because there's a lot of people who are poor or are economically stressed and are also unaware of what opportunities exist where we need installers and technicians and business owners and managers and all of those different positions in the clean energy transition in rural communities. And somebody asked a question about that. So I want to let you know, we will be working on that through the U.S. partnership. You will be hearing about it if you stay connected with Alliance events, and it'll be where we can share it with all of you and you can use it, but you can also contribute to help us design it. So Jeffrey asked, which partners should we engage for residential retrofit situations? I'm not sure which kinds of partners you're talking about, but if you're looking for contractors, there are certified contractors through BPI, Building Performance Institute. And then there's also a trade association, which is the Building Performance Association. And so those may be a couple places that you want to do. Okay, there's other messages. You guys are all connecting with each other. That's great. I don't know if there's another burning one, and we've only got 4 minutes left. So why don't we go to closing comments? Remember that form where we asked you to share your resources? So anything you haven't shared already in the chat, if you would share it in that resources page, maybe Evie, you can drop that in again, share your lessons learned and your successes. That would be great. And then I'm going to ask for closing comments from our wonderful speakers, and weren't they incredible, right? So any closing comments? Vaughn, you've been quiet since you talked. How did you build that? It's just amazing what you built. Any secrets for us you want to share?
I mean, we have buy-in from top to bottom. It's a leadership, you know, our now chief operating officer was the initial kind of brainchild of bringing apprenticeship on board a number of years ago. And then I think across the company, we center ourselves on our mission, and we have a bunch of amazing folks that we brought to the table. So, you know, the marketing team's commitment to this, the operations team commitment to this has been outstanding. You know, the marketing one is the one I'm most excited about because we need a radical paradigm shift in our country. Until most households feel really excited when their kid comes home and says, I want to be a plumber or electrician, we still have work to do, and we still have a lot of work to do. So I'm really hopeful that this group of people from across the country can help lean in on that with us.
Great. And just as a follow-up to that, if you can share with us marketing phrases you've used that have brought more students in or potential employees in, we really want to hear those because it'll feed into this, you know, recruitment campaign that we're putting together. Okay, other closing comments? Rhonda, Delmar, Cynthia, Janelle, Evie?
I have a real quick one. The panel has been great. So one of the things I would recommend is to use your networks. One, just even reaching out to the various panelists. There's a lot of good models. There's funding out there. And a lot of the great questions that were asked in the chat, there's organizations, groups that are working on many of those things across the country. So I'm sure myself and others are happy to play a little connect the dots for those that are interested. So I would say manage your networks, and most importantly, please engage and listen to the community groups. They know what's going on and they know what they need to get involved in the clean energy economy.
Thank you. Rhonda, somebody asked for your contact information, and I thought you had put it on a slide. Did you do that or not?
I did, but I can absolutely send it to you so you can get it out to everyone.
Okay, well, I do have your email. Are you okay with me putting it in a chat, or do you want to? You are?
Absolutely, totally fine. Yes, totally
Okay.
fine.
All right,
And I'll
very-
just throw out closing comments to say very quickly that I think it was said earlier, but first of all, this is exciting work, and I'm really honored, I guess, to be a part of it. And it's not going to happen overnight, right? This is going to take some time. We've been at it for a long time. We might be at it, still for a long time. But I think, to Delmar's point, keeping up with your contacts and your networks is going to be really important. Before I even had a chance to talk to or knew about this forum, and Deborah, like when we started talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much that we can do together. So definitely reach out and connect with, all of your partners, all of your networks.
And with that, we are out of time and we have a hard stop at 3:30. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to everything you've already done. Thank you even more for what you're going to be doing in the future. We appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you at the next Alliance event. And I think that's it for now.